For 9 years, Colonel Roy Ashford had not spoken a single word. Not to his daughter, not to his doctors, not to the God he had spoken to every morning for 43 years of service. The finest neurologists at 3 separate institutions had examined his brain, read his scans, and arrived at the same conclusion. The traumatic brain injury sustained during a classified operation in Syria in 2015 had permanently severed the neural pathways responsible for speech production. The vocal cords were intact, the cord was intact. The damage, they said, was deeper than any scalpel could reach. He was a man with a voice that no longer had a road to travel on. His daughter, Anna Ashford Keene, had spent the better part of those 9 years fighting that conclusion. She had tried acupuncture in Portland, a speech rehabilitation center in Switzerland, a clinical trial in Houston that lasted 11 weeks before the results came back unchanged. She had spent money she did not have. She had taken time off from a job she could not afford to lose. Her husband Patrick had driven their minivan to more hospitals than either of them could count, sitting in waiting rooms with a thermos of coffee and the quiet patience of a man who had accepted that the fight was hers, even if it wore him down too. On a Tuesday morning in March, Anna brought her father to Whitmore Medical Center in Chicago. The department was called Acquired Communication Disorders. The chief of the department was a man named Dr. Victor Crane. I want to tell you about what happened in that building before I go any further. If this kind of story is why you're here, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, drop a comment and tell me what city or state you're listening from, and subscribe if you haven't yet. This family is growing and I want you in it. Now let's begin. Meg Dunbar did not like the word hopeless. She had heard it applied to things that turned out not to be hopeless, and she had heard it applied by people who were not looking carefully enough. She had been a nurse on the 5th floor speech and neurology unit at Whitmore for 6 years, and before that she had been a lot of other things that her employment file did not mention. Her scrubs were vivid blue. She wore her dark hair pulled back tight at the base of her skull. Her hands were small and quick, the left one marked by a thin burn scar that ran from her knuckle to her wrist. A souvenir from a vehicle fire in a country whose name she was not allowed to say in certain rooms. She was 38 years old. She was 5'4". She weighed 132 pounds. She had a call sign that 9 people in the world knew, and none of them were in this hospital. At 8 in the morning, she was finishing a chart at the nurse's station when Teresa, the charge nurse, came around the desk with a folder. New consultant room 514, Teresa said. Marine colonel, retired, 9-year selective mutism post-TBI, VA referral. Meg did not look up from the chart. Did Crane see him? Crane looked at the intake summary and said the case was inoperable and to schedule a discharge consult for Thursday. Meg looked up. Thursday, Teresa repeated. The family drove in from Indianapolis. Meg set the chart down. She walked to room 514. Colonel Roy Ashford sat in the chair beside the window, not the bed. He wore a charcoal gray sweater over a collared shirt, the collar buttoned to the top. His hands were on his knees. He was 64 years old, and he had the frame of a man who had been large and strong for most of his life, and was still both of those things, only quieter now. His hair was close-cut and white at the temples. His eyes, when Meg pushed the door open, were a flat and careful brown that moved to her immediately and stayed there. Anna stood near the window with her arms crossed over her chest, not out of hostility, but because she had no other place to put them. She was in her late 30s, dark-eyed, with the look of a person who has rehearsed what she was going to say so many times that the rehearsal had worn her out. Patrick stood near the door in a fleece pullover, holding a travel mug in both hands. "Good morning," Meg said. "I'm Meg Dunbar. I'm the floor nurse assigned to your father." "Anna Keene," Anna said. "This is my husband Patrick, and this is my father, Colonel Roy Ashford, United States Marine Corps, retired." Meg looked at the colonel. He was looking at her with the same steady attention he had given her when she walked in, not suspicious, measuring. "Good morning, Colonel." She said it directly to him, not to his daughter. He dipped his chin once, half an inch. She had seen that before. Not in a hospital, in a different kind of room, in a different kind of uniform. The nod of a man who communicated in economy, because economy was what the situation called for. She began the intake, blood pressure, pulse, oxygen. She worked without small talk, which she had noticed some people found strange and others found restful. The colonel appeared to find it restful. His shoulders dropped slightly when she didn't address questions to the wall above his head, or to his daughter as though he were not present. She lifted his wrist for the pulse reading. Her thumb rested just below the base of his thumb, and she counted without thinking, and, while she counted, she let her eyes move in the way she had trained them to move, in places where eyes needed to move without appearing to move. She saw it when she set his wrist back down. Not on his wrist, on his neck, just behind the right ear at the hairline, a small pale circular mark, not a mole, not a skin tag removal. The edges were too even, the depth was wrong. It was the kind of mark that would not read as anything to anyone who had not seen it before, and Meg had seen it before. Twice, in a basement medical facility at Fort Campbell in 2011, on two men who had received a procedure that was not in any civilian medical journal she had ever read. Her face did not change. She finished the intake. She thanked the colonel. She thanked Anna and Patrick. She said she would let the attending know she had completed the assessment, and that someone from the department would be in touch. She walked out and closed the door behind her. In the hallway, she stood still for 3 seconds. Then she walked to the nurse's station, sat down, and pulled a blank sheet of paper from the tray beside the keyboard. She began to write. Teresa looked over her shoulder. "What are you doing?" "Thinking." Crane already closed the consult. Meg kept writing. Dr. Victor Crane ran the Acquired Communication Disorders department with the efficiency of a man who trusted data and distrusted variance. He was 57, silver-haired, with small wire-rimmed glasses and a habit of arriving at his conclusions before he finished the sentence that led to them. He was not unkind, exactly. He was efficient in the way a very sharp tool is efficient, useful in the right application and dangerous in the wrong one. He was dictating notes at the consultation desk when Meg came to stand at the edge of his line of sight. "Dunbar," he said, without looking up. "Dr. Crane, I'd like to talk to you about room 514. The Ashford case has been reviewed. The intake MRI from Indianapolis shows no residual neural pathway activity in the motor speech cortex. The case is consistent with the prior 3 institutional assessments. I'm scheduling a Thursday discharge." I noticed a mark behind his right ear. Crane kept dictating. A mark. Furcular, about 4 millimeters, old, behind the tragus at the hairline. He stopped dictating. He did not look at her. "Dunbar, the man has been examined by 3 neurological teams. If there were a clinically significant finding behind his ear, it would have been noted. It would only be significant if you knew what it was." Now he looked at her. He had a way of removing his glasses when he wanted to signal that a conversation had moved into territory he considered impertinent. He removed his glasses. "What do you believe it is?" Meg kept her voice level. "I believe it's a subcutaneous marker for a neural conduction assist device. A small implant, specifically a speech motor bridge, a subdermal array routed from the supplementary motor area through the internal capsule to the laryngeal motor cortex. It was developed by a joint Army-DARPA research group between 2009 and 2014. It was designed for special operations personnel who sustained acute TBI in the field with resulting speech motor disconnection. The bridge maintains a secondary conduction pathway when the primary cortical root is damaged. Doctor, if Colonel Ashford received that implant in Syria in 2015, his speech pathways have not been severed. They've been rerouting through a device that no one at Mayo or Johns Hopkins or the Houston trial knew to look for. Because the program was classified until 2021, and it was published in a single technical appendix in a DOE declassification packet that no civilian speech pathologist has ever read. The hallway was quiet. The fluorescent lights above them hummed. Crane put his glasses back on. His voice was careful now, in the way a careful man's voice gets when something has arrived that he did not anticipate. "You're a floor nurse, Dunbar." "Yes, doctor." "Where exactly did you come across this information?" Meg held his gaze. "I'd like permission to do a brief additional assessment on the colonel, 10 minutes with his consent." Crane was quiet for a long moment. "If you are wrong," he said, "you will have raised the hopes of a family that has spent 9 years in waiting rooms. And if I'm right, they've spent 9 years in waiting rooms because nobody looked behind his ear." Crane did not answer. He looked at the chart in front of him. He looked at the hallway. He looked at Meg. 10 minutes, he said. "I'm going to be in the room." Anna was on her feet when Meg came back in, Crane a step behind. "I'd like to do a brief additional examination, Colonel," Meg said. She was looking at Roy Ashford. "With your permission." He looked at her for a long moment, the same measuring look as before. Then he nodded, one deliberate dip of the chin. "Ma'am," Meg said to Anna, "I'd like to ask you and your husband to step just outside the door. It'll be a few minutes." Anna opened her mouth, closed it. She looked at her father. Roy Ashford looked at his daughter and raised his right hand off his knee. Just slightly, just a few inches, just enough. She understood. She and Patrick stepped out. Meg pulled the visitor chair close to the colonel and sat down at his eye level. She didn't need a kit for what she was about to do. "Colonel," she said quietly, "I'm going to touch the area behind your right ear, just with one finger. I need you to tell me, any way you can, if you feel anything you haven't felt before." He nodded. She reached up and placed the pad of her right index finger gently just behind his tragus, at the hairline, over the small circular mark. She pressed very slightly. Roy Ashford's jaw moved. Not a word, not a sound. But the jaw moved, the specific movement of a man whose mouth has received a signal that it has not received in 9 years and does not yet know what to do with it. His right hand came off his knee and gripped the armrest of the chair. Crane was behind Meg. She heard him take half a step forward. The colonel's eyes were fixed on Meg's face. His jaw worked again, his throat moved. Something was trying to travel a road it had almost forgotten existed. Then, in a voice that was barely a voice, rough and low and broken at the edges from 9 years of silence, he said one word. Anna. Dr. Victor Crane sat down on the edge of the hospital bed. His legs had decided to stop cooperating, which was not a thing that happened to him. Meg stood up slowly. She kept her face composed. Her right hand was at her side. She could feel her own pulse in her fingertips. Outside the door, Anna Keene had heard it. The door was not thick. She had been standing 4 feet away from it for 2 minutes, and she had heard her name in a voice she had not heard in 9 years. When Meg opened the door, Anna was already moving. She did not run, exactly. She moved the way someone moves when they are trying very hard not to fall apart before they get to where they are going. She crossed the room and stopped in front of her father's chair and put both her hands on either side of his face. Roy Ashford looked at his daughter. His eyes were wet. He had the eyes of a man who understood precisely what had just happened and who did not have words for it yet, but was working on it. Anna, he said again. The word came out stronger this time, still rough, still slow, but there. She made a sound that was not a word. She pressed her forehead against his. Patrick was in the doorway with his hand over his mouth and his eyes closed. Crane walked to where Meg was standing near the window. His voice was low. What did you press? The implant marker. It's a subcutaneous disc, about 4 millimeters. When you apply direct pressure, it sends a reset signal to the bridge array, like rebooting a router. Crane stared at her. The bridge has been carrying the signal on its own for 9 years, Meg said. But after a TBI of that severity, the device defaults to a minimal power state. It reroutes the signal, but it doesn't amplify it. The speech motor cortex has been receiving output this whole time, but at too low a voltage to produce audible speech. The pressure resets the device to full operating power. She paused. Think of it less like a severed wire, and more like a dimmer switch that's been turned almost all the way down. Crane looked at the colonel, who was holding his daughter's hand, whose mouth was moving again. Slowly, with great effort, forming shapes around words that were coming back to him one at a time, like soldiers returning from a long way away. 9 years, Crane said. 9 years. He went to 3 institutions. None of them knew what they were looking at. The program was classified. The implant is invisible on standard MRI unless you know the specific frequency band to amplify. There's a footnote in the 2021 DoD declassification packet that describes the imaging protocol. 1 footnote. Crane was quiet. He removed his glasses. He put them back on. Dunbar, he said. Who are you? Meg looked at the window, at the parking lot below, at the gray March sky. I'm the floor nurse, doctor. She turned back to him. I'm going to need a speech-language pathology consult, someone with motor speech experience, not behavioral. I'm going to need an audiologist. I'm going to need someone to run a functional MRI with contrast at the specific field frequency I'll write down for you. And I'm going to need you to contact the VA liaison here, because Colonel Ashford is going to need an inpatient rehabilitation program, and I don't want him discharged Thursday. Crane opened his mouth. Closed it. Write down the frequency, he said. By noon, the 5th floor was moving differently. The functional MRI had been fast-tracked. The speech pathology consult, a woman named Dr. Ramona Elias, who had done 2 years at a military rehabilitation center in San Antonio, came up to the unit, read what Meg had written on the paper at the nurse's station, and went pale in the specific way that a clinician goes pale when the floor shifts beneath what they thought they knew. This is real, she asked Meg. Run the MRI, you'll see it. Anna found Meg at the nurse's station at 12:40, while the colonel was being taken down for imaging. She walked up to the desk and stood there for a moment without speaking. Meg looked up. My father said your name, Anna said. When they were taking him down in the wheelchair, he said, find the nurse with the blue scrubs. He wanted me to. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. He wanted me to find you, before they took him down, because he was afraid he was going to run out of words before he got another chance. Meg waited. He said to tell you he knows what you are. Anna's voice was steady, but only just. He said he can tell, the way you looked at him, the way you asked him questions directly, not through us. He said real ones always look at you directly. Meg did not speak for a moment. Tell him I'll be here when he gets back from imaging. She was. The MRI came back at 2:15. Dr. Elias brought it herself, walking quickly, the tablet in her hand. She found Meg in the hallway outside 5-14. There's a secondary signal pathway, Elias said, lateral to the corticobulbar tract. Running parallel. I have never seen this in 15 years of reading speech motor imaging. She turned the tablet. It's bright, Meg, it's clean. The primary pathway shows scarring consistent with the TBI, but the secondary, the bridge, is fully intact. This man has had a functioning speech motor route this entire time. He has. How long have you known about this technology? Meg looked at the tablet. At the glowing parallel line in the colonel's brain, patient and continuous, carrying its signal into the dark for 9 years with no one on the other end to receive it. Long enough, she said. When Roy Ashford came back from imaging, his voice was returning the way blood comes back to a limb that has fallen asleep, tingling, imprecise, with sudden moments of clarity between stretches of nothing. He could say short words cleanly. Longer words broke apart midway and had to be rebuilt, Doctor. Elias sat with him for an hour and came out with the same bright, shaken look that Crane had been wearing since 11 that morning. 6 weeks, she told Anna in the hallway, maybe 8. With the right protocol, I think he gets to full conversational speech. There will be gaps. 9 years of disuse means the primary motor cortex has partially redistributed, and he'll need to rebuild some pathways from scratch. But the bridge is giving us a head start that I can't overstate. Anna sat down in the hallway chair and put her face in her hands, not crying, just stopping finally after 9 years of not being allowed to stop. Patrick sat beside her and put his hand on her back. Meg stood at the nurse's station and wrote in her notes. Her handwriting was small and even. At 4, Crane came to find her. He pulled a chair to the other side of the desk and sat down, which he had not done in the 6 years she had worked for him. I made some calls, he said. She looked up. To the deed liaison at the VA, to the Army Surgeon General's office, to a research contact at Walter Reed who works in neural prosthetics. He placed his hands flat on the desk. There are 11 other veterans in the national VA system with the same implant. 11 men and women who were enrolled in the same program Colonel Ashford was enrolled in, who were injured in the field, who received the bridge in the field, and who are currently listed in the VA system under the diagnosis of permanent TBI-related communication disorder. Meg set down her pen. 11 people who have a functioning secondary speech pathway, Crane continued, and whose device has been in minimal power standby for anywhere between 4 and 12 years. 11 people who have been seen by speech pathologists and neurologists and communication specialists who had no reason to look behind their ear. The hallway was quiet. Dunbar, how did you know about this program? Meg looked at the yellow legal pad on the desk. She looked at the window. She made a small, quiet decision. The same kind of decision she had been making for 20 years, in rooms with better acoustics for secrets than this one. I was a Special Forces medical sergeant for 11 years, she said. 18th Special Forces Group, my call sign was Sable. She said it the same way she would say her own name. No performance in it. I rotated through Fort Campbell in 2011. I assisted in 2 of the original implant procedures. I know the device. I know the marker. I know what the scar looks like, and I know that nobody in a civilian hospital has any reason to know it means anything. Crane was very still. I separated in 2016. I went to nursing school. I came here. She paused. I've been looking for this scar on every patient who comes through this unit for 6 years. The silence between them had a texture now. You knew there were others, Crane said. I suspected. The program enrolled 43 personnel over 5 years. I knew some of them survived their injuries. I knew the program was shut down before it was ever published. I knew nobody told them what was in the device they were carrying, or what it was doing, or that a pressure reset existed. She looked at him. I knew because I was in the room. And when the program closed and I couldn't say anything about it to anyone, I did the only thing I could think of. I got a nursing license and I started looking. Crane was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I owe you an apology. She looked at him. I said Thursday, he said. I looked at the summary and I said Thursday. You said what the data told you to say. The data was incomplete. Yes, she said, it was. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He looked like a man rearranging something internal. Carefully, making room. I want to establish a tracking protocol, he said. I want to contact the VA system and flag every patient with a TBI-related communication diagnosis who has a military special operations background from 2009 forward. I want to put together a team, you, Elias, a VA liaison, someone from the DODE Neural Prosthetics Group, and I want to start finding the other 11. We'll need the original program files. They were declassified in 2021. The technical appendix has the imaging protocol and the reset procedure. Can you get them? I know someone. She picked up her phone. She dialed a number she had memorized in 2012 and never written down. It rang 4 times, then a woman's voice, low and careful, answered. Dunbar. Priya, Meg exhaled. I found one. A pause. Where? Chicago, Whitmore Medical, he talked today. She heard Priya Sandhu, Dr. Priya Sandhu now, Neural Prosthetics Research, Johns Hopkins, draw a long breath on the other end of the line. I've been waiting for this call, Priya said. I know. I need the original technical files, the full imaging protocol, and I need you here. When? As soon as you can. I'll be on the first train tomorrow morning. Meg hung up. She sat alone at the nurse's station for a moment. The floor was quieter now, the late afternoon quiet of a hospital settling into its second shift. Through the window of room 514 she could see Roy Ashford in the chair by the window. He was talking. Slowly, with effort, with the visible labor of a man rebuilding something brick by brick. But he was talking. Anna was sitting beside him on the edge of the bed, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees, listening the way a person listens when they are afraid to move in case the sound stops. Patrick had pulled a chair to the other side and was writing on his phone. She could see from his expression that he was texting family. Roy Ashford said something. Anna laughed. Not a polite laugh, the startled, disbelieving, sudden laugh of a person who has received something they had stopped expecting. Meg turned back to her desk. She pulled the yellow legal pad toward her. She wrote 11 names across the top of the page. Names that the VA database would give her. Names that had spent years being carried by a device no one knew to look for. She underlined them. She turned off her monitor. She picked up her bag. She walked out of the unit, down the hallway, past the desk where Crane was still on the phone, past the elevator bank, and down the stairwell to the lobby. On the way out, she passed the family consultation room. Through the small window in the door, she could see a couple she didn't recognize. Older, a man in a veteran's cap and a woman with her hands folded in her lap, waiting. The particular stillness of people who have been waiting long enough that they have stopped looking at the clock. Meg stopped. She looked at the woman's hands. She looked at the man's cap. She pushed open the door. Good evening, she said. I'm Meg Dunbar. I'm the nurse on this floor. Is there something I can help you with?